You brought tanks to a knife fight? That's cute. Sergeant Caleb Ward grinned as he pulled the pin on a grenade and tossed it over the charred husk of a fallen drone walker. The explosion sent shrapnel flying, tearing through the nearest insectoid invader with a sickening crunch. Their once impervious chitinous armor proved worthless against simple kinetic projectiles. Humans had adapted quickly. The Zir had not. The alien conquerors arrived in massive warships, casting shadows over entire cities, broadcasting their demands for surrender in every language. Humanity's answer came in the form of a shoulder-fired missile launch by a teenager in Detroit. The war was declared before the smoke had even cleared. For the Zir, it was supposed to be an easy conquest. They had done it countless times before, arriving on primitive worlds, crushing resistance, enslaving populations. But Earth was different. Something was wrong. Their first miscalculation came in orbit. Deploying their troops, they expected immediate planetary pacification. Instead, they lost half their forces to Earth's gravity. Too strong. The invaders shattered on impact, their bodies unprepared for the relentless pull of 9.8 meters per second squared. Those that survived struggled to move, weighed down by armor designed for weaker worlds. Their second mistake was assuming Earth's environment would be hospitable. It wasn't. The bacteria alone were deadlier than their weapons. A single breath of unfiltered air led to infections they had no defenses against. Even their bioengineered war beasts succumbed. They deployed armored quadrupeds capable of leveling mountains, only to watch them collapse, lungs burning from an atmosphere thick with invisible predators. Their third and final mistake was underestimating humanity. Ward and his unit moved through the ruins of what had once been a Zir command post. Their technology was advanced, their tactics refined, but Earth was a nightmare of unpredictability. Rain corroded their armor. The cold froze their circuits. Even the wildlife fought back. A squad of elite Zir soldiers had been wiped out by what horrified survivors described as a small, aggressive land mammal covered in spines. Someone later identified it as a badger. Ward stepped over the twisted remains of a Zir warrior, his rifle barrel still warm. Their plasma weapons were ineffective against human ingenuity. High-energy bursts that melted metal were shrugged off by cheap, old-fashioned ceramic plating. Meanwhile, bullets ripped through their exoskeletons with ease. His earpiece crackled. "Sergeant, we've intercepted their latest transmission. They're trying to evacuate. Orders." Ward glanced up. The sky was filled with burning wreckage. Humanity had already taken down 2 of their warships, using nothing but repurposed space junk and a few desperate pilots with nothing left to lose. "They started this fight," Ward said. "No survivors." Across the battlefield, humanity advanced. Men in patched-up body armor wielding scavenged weapons stormed the remaining Zir positions. Some carried rifles. Others carried nothing but sharpened metal and sheer determination. The Zir formations collapsed. Their communications were in shambles. They had expected to fight an inferior species. Instead, they had walked into a war unlike any they had ever known, one where the battlefield itself fought alongside their enemy. A Zir officer, taller than the others, stumbled into view, clutching a scorched plasma rifle. He aimed at Ward, mandibles clicking in one last act of defiance. Ward simply stared at him. The Zir hesitated. That was a mistake. A single shot rang out. The alien fell. Ward kept moving. The war wasn't over yet. He climbed onto a pile of debris, scanning the horizon. Smoke rose from burning warships. The sky was dark with the remnants of their once mighty fleet. Earth was a death world, and the Zir had just learned why. They weren't leaving. None of them. Humanity wasn't stopping until the last invader was gone. Ward adjusted his rifle and looked toward the ruins of Chicago, shrouded in thick smoke, jagged steel, and the skeletal remains of a once thriving city. The Zir had turned the financial district into a stronghold, their last foothold on Earth. But there was no escape. Not anymore. The convoy rumbled to a halt just outside the city, tires grinding over cracked asphalt. The air smelled of burnt metal and ozone, remnants of lingering plasma discharges. Ward stepped out, his boots kicking up dust as he approached the makeshift command station, an armored truck reinforced with scavenged plating. A scout jogged up, wiping sweat and grime from his face. Heavy fortifications ahead. Their main force is in the metro tunnels. If they make it out, they'll try for the launch site. Ward nodded. Then we bury them before they dig their way out. There were no speeches, no grand battle cries, just orders and action. Humanity had learned the hard way that Ward didn't wait for dramatic moments. He signaled his team. The first wave moved forward, slipping between the ruins with precision. No wasted steps, no hesitation. The first explosion hit before they reached the outskirts. A plasma mine tore through the lead vehicle, flipping it onto its side. A split second later, alien snipers opened fire from the remains of a collapsed high-rise. "Ambush!" someone shouted. Ward didn't need to be told. He was already moving, diving behind the rusted-out husk of a sedan. He peered through his scope. The Zir had taken positions in shattered buildings, using the high ground to their advantage. Their plasma bolts scorched the air, turning brick to slag and steel to molten puddles. Ward lined up a shot, a Zir sniper repositioned on a rooftop, multifaceted eyes scanning for targets. Ward pulled the trigger. The bullet punched through the alien's carapace. The sniper tumbled over the edge, crashing onto the rubble below. "Push forward," Ward ordered. A grenade sailed through the air, bouncing off a wrecked bus before detonating inside a building where several Zir had taken cover. The explosion sent debris raining down, their shrieks of agony echoing through the ruined streets. The humans advanced, using cover, flanking where possible, fighting with the ruthless efficiency that had turned this war from a desperate struggle into a slaughter. The Zir were losing. They had come with superior technology, overwhelming numbers, and the arrogance of conquerors. But they had never fought anything like humanity. They had never faced an enemy that turned every disadvantage into an advantage. Their plasma weapons were powerful, but they ran out of energy. Their armor was strong, but it shattered under kinetic force. Their numbers meant nothing when their bodies couldn't handle Earth's gravity, its bacteria, its endless, unrelenting hostility. And then there was the way humans fought. The Zir followed tactics that had worked on 100 conquered worlds: mass bombardments, overwhelming infantry charges, mechanized dominance. But humanity didn't break. It adapted. It learned. It used guerrilla tactics, ambushes, sabotage. It turned its own dead into traps, its own cities into kill zones. Ward had heard the reports. Entire Zir units wiped out in forests by creatures smaller than their hands. A war beast that had survived a dozen planetary invasions, dying in agony after eating a single wild mushroom. A squad of elite soldiers torn apart by a pack of stray dogs. Earth was not just a battlefield, it was a weapon. And right now, Chicago was its hammer. The ruined street was filled with chaos. A Zir commander shouted orders, desperately rallying his troops. Ward exhaled one shot. The bullet tore through the alien's throat, cutting off his command mid-sentence. The Zir soldiers hesitated. That was their last mistake. The humans surged forward, overwhelming them, forcing them back. The Zir had nowhere left to go but underground, exactly where Ward wanted them. By nightfall, the last of them had retreated into the metro tunnels beneath the city, hoping to regroup to escape. Ward stood at the entrance, watching the distant glow of their energy weapons flicker in the depths. He activated his radio, set the charges. The explosives were already in place, planted by teams who had slipped through the city hours before the assault. The tunnels were old, fragile. It wouldn't take much to bring them down. There was a pause on the line, then a single response, detonating. The ground trembled. A low rumble built beneath their feet, then erupted into a deafening roar as the charges ignited. Fire and rock exploded into the night sky, sending shockwaves rippling through the ruins. The streets buckled, buildings shook, then collapsed. The metro tunnels caved in, sealing the Zir inside. Ward watched the dust settle, the last echoes of the explosion fading into the distance. It was over, at least this part of it. The Zir had thought they were superior, that they were the apex species. They were wrong. Ward turned to his men. "We're done here." He looked back at the ruins of the city, at the fires still burning, at the skies still heavy with smoke. There was still work to do. Earth wasn't just surviving, it was winning. Ward stood at the edge of the ruins, rifle slung over his shoulder, watching the dust settle over what had once been the last escape route for the Zir. The metro tunnels had collapsed in a cascade of fire and rubble, sealing the aliens underground. The war wasn't just ending. It was being erased one battle at a time. The remaining soldiers around him let out exhausted breaths, some dropping to their knees, others gripping their weapons with shaking hands. No one cheered. There was no celebration, only the reality of survival. The radio crackled. "Ward, we've got movement near the old lakefront. Looks like a pocket of stragglers trying to regroup." Of course they were. The Zir weren't just going to sit underground and die quietly. They would claw, they would fight, they would struggle until the last of them was wiped from existence. "Round up what's left of the squad," Ward ordered. "We finished this." He started walking before anyone could reply. The road ahead was littered with broken vehicles. The pavement cracked from the shock waves of past bombardments. The skyline of Chicago was almost unrecognizable. Towering buildings now little more than skeletal remains, their metal frames jutting out like the ribs of a long-dead beast. The Zir had chosen this city as their last stand, but they never understood what that really meant. A last stand wasn't about defense. It wasn't about fortifications. It was about defiance. And humans excelled at that. As Ward and his men moved through the streets, they saw what the war had left behind. Scorched bodies, some alien, some human, scattered across the battlefield. The wreckage of the invaders' war machines, too advanced for Earth armies to match, now lay in ruin, toppled by ingenuity and desperation. Ahead, near what used to be Grant Park, the last Zir forces were making their move. They had fortified a makeshift command center near the ruins of an old skyscraper, plasma turrets set up in a desperate attempt to hold their ground. Ward crouched behind the charred remains of a civilian bus, watching the aliens scramble. "They're stalling," one of the soldiers beside him muttered. "Try to buy time for reinforcements that aren't coming." "They don't get to stall," Ward said. He signaled the others, and within moments, the first sniper shot cracked through the air, taking down a Zir officer. The alien collapsed, his body twitching on the ground, mandibles clicking in silent confusion. Then the fight truly began. Gunfire erupted from the human side, bullets cutting through alien armor like it was nothing. The Zir returned fire, their plasma bolts searing through concrete and steel, but they were outnumbered, outmatched, and, more than anything, afraid. Ward moved quickly, weaving through cover, his rifle firing short, controlled bursts. Every shot counted. The Zir had advanced energy shielding, but only in theory. In practice, their defenses had been built for energy weapons, not the brute force of lead and steel. The humans pushed forward, clearing the streets, sweeping through the remnants of the Zir forces like a storm. Explosions tore through their final barricades, sending shattered metal and alien bodies flying. Ward spotted the last of their commanders, a tall, armored figure with deep violet plating, the insignia of their ruling caste etched into his chest. The alien turned, raising a massive curved blade, glowing with some kind of energy field. Ward didn't hesitate. He fired once, twice. The first bullet struck the alien's shoulder, staggering him. The second hit just beneath the chin, tearing through his head. The Zir commander dropped, twitching. The fight was over before it had even begun. Ward stepped forward, standing over the corpse, watching the light fade from its eyes. For a moment, there was silence. Then the radio crackled again. All enemy forces in the area are neutralized. Ward let out a slow breath. It was over. For real this time. He turned, scanning the battlefield. The last of the Zir lay dead. Their once mighty war machines were nothing but wreckage, their weapons useless. The invincible empire that had once brought terror to the stars had been shattered, not by superior technology, not by overwhelming force, but by something far more terrifying, by humans. Ward walked back to his squad, their faces a mix of exhaustion and quiet relief. Some sat on the ruins of what had once been an alien transport, catching their breath. Others stared at the skyline, at the city they had fought to reclaim. One of the soldiers, a younger guy who had joined the fight only a few months ago, exhaled. "We actually did it." Ward nodded. "Yeah, we did." He looked up at the sky, the thick clouds of smoke beginning to clear. The sun was rising, casting a golden light over the ruins of Chicago. It was the first sunrise of a world without the Zir. Humanity had won, but there was still work to do. Ward turned to his men. "Gather what supplies we can. The war's over, but we've got a planet to rebuild." They had survived the impossible. They had driven back an enemy that had never known defeat. And now, they would rebuild. The war was over. Earth belonged to humans again.